I want to describe the restaurant accurately because the setting matters. It was the kind of place with cloth napkins and candles that have been chosen for their height. Thomas had made the reservation 6 weeks in advance. 11 guests. His family mostly, a few couples we'd collected together over 6 years of marriage. Roberta at the far end, near the window, in the cream blouse she wears when she wants to look like she isn't trying. 6 years. That was what we were celebrating. I had spent most of those 6 years learning the grammar of this family, what Roberta meant when she said lovely in a certain tone, which subjects required navigation, how to be present at a table full of people who had known Thomas before I did and had loved someone else in the chair I was sitting in. I had learned it the way you learn a language you weren't raised in. Functional fluency, occasional errors. I thought I knew what the toast would be. Roberta stood up, glass raised. She looked at Thomas first, then around the table, and I felt the familiar settling of someone who has done this before, arranged her face into warmth, prepared to receive something she would have to process later. She said Claire's name inside the first 30 seconds, not as context, not as a brief, careful acknowledgement of history, as the subject, as the point. She talked about what Claire had meant to the family, about the way Claire had made holidays feel like holidays, about how some people enter a life and change the shape of it permanently. She used the word irreplaceable, and I watched Thomas look down at his wine glass and stay there. 4 minutes. I know because there is a clock visible from where I was sitting and I needed something to look at that wasn't a face. Nobody stopped her. Nobody shifted uncomfortably enough to matter. The guests who knew Claire listened with the soft attention of people revisiting something they loved. The guests who didn't know Claire looked at the table. Nobody looked at me. I cut my food into very small pieces. My hands needed something to do and this was the most neutral option available. I kept my face in a configuration I have practiced. I made it through the word irreplaceable a second time, which she used near the end, and I made it through the applause, which was light but real, and I made it through Roberta sitting down and Thomas lifting his glass in a toast that had not been about me or about us, or about 6 years of a life we had actually built together. Then I finished my dinner. I didn't say anything that night. Not in the car, not at home, not while Thomas moved through his pre-sleep routine with the particular carefulness of a man who knows something is wrong and is hoping proximity to normalcy will resolve it. I didn't say anything Saturday either. I have learned over 6 years that Thomas processes conflict by waiting for it to pass. This has worked before. I have let it work before. I have absorbed and adjusted and reframed and told myself that Roberta is a woman who lost a daughter-in-law she loved, and grief doesn't follow polite timelines, and patience is a form of love. I have told myself these things many times. Sitting at that table, cutting my food into small pieces, I understood that I had been telling myself these things in place of something I hadn't been willing to name. Monday morning I made 2 phone calls. The first was to a family therapist named Dr. Aldridge, whose name I had written in a notebook 4 months earlier after a different Roberta evening, and then not called. I made an appointment. The second call took longer to make. I sat with my coffee for 20 minutes first. Then I called an attorney, not a divorce attorney, I want to be precise about that, to ask about postnuptial agreements. I had come into this marriage with assets that had never been formally structured between us. I wanted to understand what that meant and what my options were. I told Thomas what I'd done when he came downstairs. He went still in the way people go still when something they'd been vaguely dreading becomes specific and real. He asked why I hadn't said something at the dinner. I told him I had been saying something for 6 years. I told him I had said it every time I smiled through something I should have named. Every time I gave Roberta another chance I hadn't been asked whether I wanted to give. Every time I sat at a table in this family and made myself smaller, so there was room for a woman who has been gone for 9 years. I told him I was tired. He didn't argue. He looked at me for a long time and then he said he was sorry, which he has said before, but this time something in his face was different, less reflexive, more reckoning. We are still married. We see Dr. Aldridge on Thursdays. Roberta doesn't know what happened Monday. That conversation is coming and I am not looking forward to it. The postnuptial agreement is being drafted. Thomas signed the retainer without being asked twice. I am not leaving. I want to be clear about that, but I am also not simply staying, which is what I had been doing. Those are different things. It took 4 minutes at a candlelit table for me to finally understand the difference.